Seth Kinman, an active hunter during the Old West period, became known for his ability to craft chairs using materials obtained from his hunting expeditions. At one point, he was received by President Andrew Johnson and decided to offer a striking gift: a chair built with elk antlers and covered with bearskin. Jeremiah Johnson lived as a hunter and explorer in the mountains of the American West during the 19th century. His routine was drastically interrupted when a warrior from the Crow tribe killed his wife, sparking in him a strong desire for revenge. Determined to retaliate, Johnson began hunting members of that tribe, adopting methods considered extreme. In addition to executing his opponents, he would often scalp them and eat their livers. During the 19th century, prostitution was a legal practice in Arizona and several other U.S. states. At that time, the Arizona government generated revenue through the issuance of brothel licenses, the collection of specific taxes, and the application of fines for infractions. These measures ensured an additional source of income for the state, which directly benefited from the resources generated by this activity. In the 19th century, prostitution was legally recognized in many places, but continued to face social disapproval. Even though there was official regulation, sex workers were subjected to strict control measures, often under police and medical supervision. They faced exclusion in many aspects, being stigmatized and encountering difficulties in obtaining housing and moving freely in certain spaces. Rodeos attracted a diverse audience, including entire families and people of all ages, all eager to experience Old West traditions up close. At one such event in California, the crowd witnessed a remarkable scene. A woman guided her horse in a leap over a convertible car, impressing those present. Ralph Madsen was recognized as the tallest Texas cowboy. He stood over 7 feet 6 inches, 2.28 meters tall, weighed about 230 pounds, 104 kilograms, and stood out in rodeos and other public events due to his extraordinary height, making him a well-known figure during the Old West era. Annie Oakley was born in 1860 in the state of Ohio, and began her journey as a sharpshooter in her youth. She gained recognition after defeating renowned marksmen and participating in shows like Buffalo Bill's Wild West, where she demonstrated her accuracy by hitting moving targets. Her fame grew, and she gained significant public visibility, becoming one of the first women to achieve such a level of recognition in the United States. William Frederick Cody, known as Buffalo Bill, became even more famous when he created a show that combined performances by cowboys and members of various Native American groups, called Buffalo Bill's Wild West. The show included reenactments of typical Old West scenes, such as bison hunts and firearms demonstrations, drawing great public attention. Bass Reeves, recognized as the first black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi River, was born in 1838 and grew up during the era of slavery. It is believed that he escaped servitude during the Civil War and took refuge in indigenous territories, where he learned native languages and survival skills. In 1875, he was appointed Deputy U.S. Marshal by Judge Isaac Parker, nicknamed the Hangman of the West, and held that position for more than 3 decades. One of the most common occupations in the Old West was hunting, and many hunters traveled to the Four Peaks region in Arizona to take advantage of the variety of available game, such as deer, rabbits, bears, and cougars. The environment consisted of mountainous areas with steep trails and scarce water sources, requiring careful expedition planning. James Butler Hickok, known as Wild Bill, was born on May 27, 1837 in the state of Illinois, and became one of the most famous figures of the Old West. He displayed great skill in handling firearms, almost always carrying a pair of revolvers. Throughout his life, he worked as a buffalo hunter, stagecoach guide, and lawman, engaging in shootouts in various frontier regions. A photographic record from the early 1880s shows Billy the Kid, the infamous outlaw of the Old West, seated second from the left during a card game with members of his gang. The image, considered a rarity, reinforces the prominent position he held among the criminals of that time, a role similar to what Wyatt Earp represented for law enforcement. The Mountain Men were hunters and explorers who roamed the mountainous and rural areas of the American West, particularly during the first half of the 19th century. They specialized in hunting animals for their pelts, which were traded at commercial posts along trade routes. In addition to mastering survival techniques, they learned about edible plants, methods of purifying water, and ways to endure harsh winters. The year is 1907 in the American Old West, where life required practical and sometimes unusual solutions. In this setting, a cow was tasked with taking 7 children to school daily. Instead of horses or wagons, the animal traveled along dirt roads while the children rode on its back. For them, this type of transportation was part of their routine, although today it seems unusual. At the end of the 19th century, Guthrie, Oklahoma, became a hub of expansion in the territory, driven by the land run of 1889. Entire families arrived in wagons bringing few belongings but much determination. Gradually, tents turned into simple houses, while stores and saloons emerged to meet the needs of the newcomers. Annie Oakley, whose birth name was Phoebe Ann Mosey, was born in 1860 in the state of Ohio into a family that faced financial hardships, especially after her father's death. As a child, she began hunting to help support her mother and siblings, demonstrating exceptional marksmanship from an early age. Over time, her skill became known in the region, attracting the interest of William Frederick Cody, famous as Buffalo Bill. A group of Navajo horsemen sets out on a long journey across the desert of Canyon de Chelly, guiding their animals through narrow paths and rocky slopes. Along the route, they face intense heat and a lack of water, using techniques passed down through generations to navigate the arid terrain. Quanah Parker, recognized as the last chief of the Comanches, played a significant role in the history of the American Old West. Born around 1845, he was the son of Cynthia Ann Parker, a white woman captured as a child, and Peta Nocona, a Comanche chief. Throughout the 19th century, the Comanches engaged in numerous conflicts with the United States Army, which sought to expand its control over indigenous lands. Quanah Parker led his people in several battles, striving to preserve their social organization and way of life. In 1906, Cow Claw, a Tlingit woman from Alaska, donned her ceremonial dance attire to take part in a potlatch, a traditional gathering that involved dancing, singing, and the sharing of stories. On that occasion, she and other community members came together to perform rituals that strengthened bonds and upheld cultural values. During the westward expansion of the United States, many families left other regions in search of farmland and better living conditions. In Custer County, Nebraska, wood was scarce, leading many settlers to use blocks of compacted earth as their primary building material. This technique resulted in the so-called sod houses, covered with grass and capable of providing shelter against the harsh climate of the plains. Throughout his time in the Old West, James Miller was involved in numerous gunfights and shootouts, known for his ability to remain composed under pressure and for his reliable marksmanship. These traits earned him the nicknames Killin' Jim or Killer Miller. On several occasions, he was hired as a gunman and also participated in crimes such as bank and train robberies, solidifying his reputation as a dangerous man. The Homestead Act, signed into law in 1862, granted American citizens the right to claim up to 160 acres of public land. To secure ownership, they were required to build a residence and maintain cultivation for at least 5 years. Seeking this opportunity, many families migrated to Nebraska, hoping to establish small farms and improve their living conditions. Their adaptation was marked by challenges, including extremely hot summers, harsh winters, and a scarcity of supplies. Pearl Hart was born in Canada and eventually moved to the western United States, where in 1899 she planned and carried out a stagecoach robbery in Arizona. To evade witnesses, she dressed in men's clothing and was assisted by a partner named Joe Boot. The group stole little money, but the fact that a woman had participated in such a crime caught the attention of authorities and the press. Pearl was arrested, tried, and sent to a territorial prison, which contributed to making her a well-known figure in the history of the Old West. The rivalry between the Hatfield and McCoy families began on the border between Kentucky and West Virginia after the Civil War. The dispute, allegedly triggered by the theft of a pig, escalated due to land conflicts, political disagreements, and accusations of crimes, resulting in more than a dozen deaths. The tension between the two families lasted for decades, and culminated in a court case that reached the U.S. Supreme Court, marking one of the most infamous family feuds in American history. In 1894, the city of Midland, Texas, was struck by a sandstorm that swept through the region, causing damage to rural properties and harming crops. A photograph of this event captures the dust cloud that formed and illustrates the force of the winds, highlighting how natural phenomena affected daily life and the local economy. This historical record underscores how nature could make survival even more challenging for those trying to prosper in that environment. In 1894, in the Oklahoma Territory, a law office operated in Round Pond, handling land claim negotiations. The office served pioneers seeking to legalize their property holdings and conduct buying and selling transactions, ensuring that all documentation complied with existing laws. The Rufus Buck Gang was formed in the late 19th century by young African American and Indigenous men who united to challenge the laws of a time marked by territorial disputes and racial tensions. Led by Rufus Buck, they committed robberies, thefts, and kidnappings, targeting travelers, farms, and small communities in the Old West. Their actions caught the attention of both local and federal authorities, who began tracking their movements and organizing operations to stop them. Amid frequent clashes with law enforcement and rival gangs, the group managed to survive for a time but was eventually captured after a large police raid. After a trial, its members were sentenced to hanging, bringing their criminal activities to a definitive end.